All right.
Hello, my name is Eric Meier, and I'm an attorney at Husch Blackwell and one of the co-leaders of my firm's construction practice group. As part of our Construction Academy, we're focused on delivering industry thought leadership in a timely manner. I have the pleasure today of speaking with two industry leaders about a joint effort undertaken by their respective companies for modular critical care units designed to address issues we are facing with the COVID-19 pandemic. Ben Bruns is an executive vice president of the Boldt Company, leading the Northern operations team. Ben majored in construction engineering at Iowa State while playing offensive line for the Cyclones football team. For the past 2 decades, Ben has worked in the construction industry in a variety of different roles, and he brings a wealth of knowledge to our discussion here today. Kurt Spiering is a principal at HGA and leader of the firm's national healthcare sector. Kurt is a fellow Iowa State Cyclone, earning his bachelor's of engineering and architecture there before later obtaining his master's in architecture from UW-Milwaukee. It takes about 2 minutes in speaking with Kurt to know that he has depth of experience and perspectives to share on a variety of topics. The topic we're going to talk about today hits on a variety of key considerations for construction and design firms, ranging from joint venturing to technology to modular construction and navigating complex issues at a rapid pace. So turning the floor over to Ben and Kurt. First, thanks to both of you guys for participating today.
Yeah,
and Ben, can you lead off by walking us through what the product is and how things got started?
Yeah, sure, you bet. So go back to March 13th, and around that time, it seemed like everything was beginning to stand still, right? The Pacific Northwest had coronavirus outbreak for probably a month plus at that time, and the death toll was starting to rise, which is just horrible even saying out loud. And then the East Coast obviously had started in facing the same kind of challenge in multiple major metropolitan areas. And I had been on a tour of our shop in Appleton, Wisconsin. Boldt is a billion-dollar contractor based in Appleton, Wisconsin, but with offices across the country. And about 50% of our work on an annual basis is in healthcare. And I just joined the organization in October of last year, leading the Northern Operations Group. So I lead a geographic region. And one that's relatively isolated from what we've seen across the other in a lot of places, the effect of coronavirus. But I'm walking through our shop, and I know that the world is changing, and life as we know it is about to really change. And it just so happened that on that very day, we were proving the roadworthiness of a modular prefabricated clinic. Boldt had partnered with one of the very large systems in the Chicagoland area, healthcare system, to create a modular clinic prototype. And this particular module had 4 rooms in a 40-foot by 12-foot prefabricated metal frame box. And we took it out on the highway and drove it around. It was proved to be roadworthy. And as I walked back to my office, I was struck by the fact that what are we going to do? How are we going to continue to even do business? Are we going to be able to help anybody in our sector? They're going to allow us into hospitals where we are currently doing lots of work all over the country, or are we going to be asked to stay out? And I reached out to our COO, Dave Kiewit, and Dave is really one of the leaders in healthcare construction in the country. And my background's not in healthcare, and so as I started to postulate on where we might end up with this, I just said, "Hey, Dave, I got a crazy idea. What if we took this modular concept, and could we find a way to adapt it and have it be useful?" And so we talked about how we would do that. And the first thing we wanted to do was go get an expert in healthcare design. And Kurt and his team at HGA immediately were top of mind, in part because we've done $600 million worth of work together in the sector, in part because they're one of the absolute leaders in healthcare design in the country. They have 800 people on staff. I mean, it's a huge organization. I'd just been in their office in Milwaukee a couple weeks before, meeting some of the team, and then it just so happens Kurt also not only is our resident expert in what the heck we would do with this technology that we've created to be useful, but he happens to be a cyclone too. So
it's all good.
Life is good. So Kurt jumped in, and his team, that was Friday. It was Friday the 13th that all this happened. And by Saturday and Sunday, we had a team in place. And Monday we kicked off with our first meeting. And how many people were on the first call, Kurt? Maybe 15 of us?
Yeah, 15, maybe 20. It was a large group.
Yep.
Right.
And then within a matter of about 4 days, and we met every single day, and I'll get, turn the floor over and you can talk about what and why and how on earth we ended up with the concept that we did. But, next thing you know, there's 80 people on these calls. And they're 30 minutes, and we're trying to keep a tight agenda. People are going off and tackling significant issues in a really short amount of time, and we're just swarming this thing. And within a week's time, we had a concept that we'd already tested and vetted with some potential customers, healthcare users, but also we had a price and a schedule. So it's nothing. Every single person had a part to do with that, but Kurt's team and their expertise in helping us figure out what the product is that we need and what it looks like and how quickly they did the design was amazing. So,
thanks, Ben. I appreciate that. It's been really a team effort, and you need we call this the speed of trust, right? The trust that you develop between partners who've either worked together before or have sort of a common bond, common understanding. So when Ben came to us and said we need to do this, and we knew that the window of opportunity was closing, I was actually out in Colorado trying to get in a ski weekend, and they closed a ski hill. So when Ben called me, my antenna was up saying, this is pretty serious. We need to do something about it. And so when he called, we were in the right frame of mind to say, well, how can maybe this is our time to take all that expertise that we've been building over the years and be able to actually help a country and help patients and help our clients, heal better. So we sat down and said, what is this and what is it not? So we could have a sense of focus and then come to closure pretty quickly around solutions. And so what we decided was this is it's there to meet the surge, has to be there in a quick period of time. So it has to also be clinical quality that's equal to what you get in a hospital, because that's what our clients know us to deliver. We don't do tents, we do buildings. And so could we do that same clinical quality we do in a building, but do it in a modular format? And then is the supply chain going to be intact? We didn't know on March 15th. Where is that going to be? So could we buy off-the-shelf items that we didn't have to prefabricate? But could we take sort of ordinary pieces and create sort of really high-tech, extraordinary mechanical systems to help, create negative pressure in rooms and create, air qualities with medical gases and other systems that we knew these patients were going to need? So that was the challenge, but we created a really narrow band so that we could focus on what this product could be in the short term. And that was really the catalyst for, why is it a critical care room? What about the distances around beds? What about the infrastructure needs, and how would we solve that? And what was nice to have the constructor and the architect, the designer together, were that we, in these large meetings, as Ben talked about it, we looked at different components of the project. What is the exterior? What is the interior finish? What's the mechanical system? And we had the designer and the builder and the fabricator together, and we could make real-time decisions. We could weigh and then there's nothing like the pressure of time to force decision-making, right? Mm-hmm. We use the analogy of saying pressure, that, pressure could blow things apart, or, pressure can create diamonds. And I think in this case, the way the team worked together, we really, we turned into a diamond in the rough. We didn't know it at the time, but I think in retrospect, that, we really had the right catalyst, the right people at the table to make those decisions.
Well, in our industry, we talk about risk a lot, right? And in this case, there were lots of risks, but in one way, we were willing to take on the risk of a product development, kind of at our own, whatever. I mean, HGA had invested a pile of money in terms of staff time and focus and energy, and Boldt had, similarly started to amass. We always trail the design team because there's more front end work that they do, but shortly thereafter, we're pricing and scheduling and swarming this thing, and then we're starting to purchase parts and pieces, right? To begin a fabrication when in fact we don't yet have a buyer. And that's really unusual in our industry. Almost always somebody commissions our work collectively, right? And we go tackle a problem. And typically our cash flow is not set up to be able to do this, but we knew with the situation the way it was, we had a really strong concept and the right group of people in the room, and B, we knew there was an obvious need. And so from that, we were willing to start to take a leap of faith that at some point somebody would say, you know what, I have to have this.
And there were some constraints that were placed on us. Ben said the most we can ship in normal shipping operation would be a 10-foot wide or 12-foot wide by 10-foot high by 40-foot long box. So we now kind of jokingly refer to it as inside the box thinking. So we had to be creative, but that constraint really helped us because we didn't have to spend days or weeks analyzing, what that was. He already brought that to us. And so we took that as a given and then worked within that to create the various pieces and parts. Because what came out of this was a kit of parts that you can mix and match to customize to your particular need, whether you need a whole ward of beds, 12 bed ward, you need 8 isolation rooms, what kind of staff support spaces do you think you need on the site, which depends on how long you'll be using them. For instance, at Maryland, we're sending what I'll call like a quick ship program. So it's a very quick, focused on the COVID patient, focused on high intensity patients. We're now, with the benefit of time, we're looking at different options and generations that expand that to be more universal and acuity adaptable based on patient needs, so that this might have a longer life than just the initial COVID response that we were dealing with in the first place.
One of the things, guys, that we talked about earlier was how you were involving some of the healthcare professionals to get their insights on needs, wants, things that should be considered as part of this process. Could you touch on, how did you do that, why it was important, and were you able to incorporate any of the feedback you received into the project?
Sure. Ben, do you want me to touch on that?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
And then I want to talk about how we translated that to the construction team. So I think you can help me add on to this discussion. But I think that initially we now all were in shelter in place. So we were not wanting to bring large groups of people together in big, in work environments. So whereas we might have had a big room concept where, those 20 people we had on the phone might have all been in one room, we had to do it virtually. And so the same thing had to be done with the input of the users. We had 3 organizations locally in the Milwaukee area, healthcare organizations, that helped us with bringing some qualified people who were familiar with COVID patients, either nurses who had actually treated patients or quality people who had to actually oversee the operations at a hospital, who could really provide us insight about the operational needs and then the specific needs about the treatment paths for those patients. Now, how we obtained that information was through virtual reality. And HGA had been using it in the workplace, but we've been using it primarily to document designs that had been done so we could communicate with our clients. But we actually use this as an active design tool in this case, partly born by the emergency we were in and the restrictions that we were in, but it turned out to be really well. We made pieces and parts, sinks, beds, head walls. We made those all in virtual reality tools and in the software, So we literally put the nurse in the room with the headset on in the virtual room. And in this case, she could walk through and do care scenarios. We could move beds, cabinets, sinks on any wall or any surface. And they went ahead and moved through and saw, could I transfer a patient in this bed? Is the hand washing sink in the right location? If it wasn't, we could move it right in the model real time. So within about 3 2-hour sessions, we actually walked through these spaces and tested them in the actual virtual world. And then that's what we ended up documenting at that point. And then we turned that over to Ben for the constructors to actually move forward and build the model. But it compressed that time greatly, but also gave the users just a wonderful way to understand. A lot of people can't read drawings, right? So their understanding and their cycle time of how they processed information was instantaneous compared to what it typically is in a traditional process.
Yeah, and so the other thing that this line of conversation reminds me of is, part of what Kurt's describing there is the power of partnerships, and so you've got customer partnerships that help, drive what the product is and help us form that. But then we also had expert partnerships from trade partners. So Faith Technologies and Tweet Garrett are mechanical and electrical, respectively, experts in our area, and we brought them into this right from the beginning. We needed help from a shipping and logistics perspective, and so through a relationship that Tweet Garrett had, we ended up talking to Craig Dickman from Titletown Tech up in Green Bay. And Craig suggested we talk to Breakthrough Fuels and John Deere about logistics because they ship big stuff all over the place all the time. And we're a construction company. We ship cranes and excavators and kind of parts and pieces around the country with regularity, but we're not shipping 40-foot containers with $300,000+ values on them, 40 of them at a time, various places. And by the way, they need to look exactly like they looked coming off the factory floor when they arrive. And so, between Breakthrough and John Deere's logistics groups, how cool that a company like that, like Deere and Company, would have interest in something like this and be able to help us source the right vendor to carry these things from Appleton to all over. And in this particular case, we just today sent 4 modules out the door, the first 4 to Maryland, and it's a pretty cool day.
I timed the call just to make sure alignment there, so I'll take credit for that, guys. Awesome. You guys did all the hard work, and I just scheduled the call on the right day. So
yeah, but seeing those out in the yard and knowing all the work that's gone into it, it really does have a good feeling of accomplishment. But now we got to send them out and assemble them, so we still have more work to do.
So work me through that process, right? So you've talked a little bit about the kind of the design or the idea generation, going to the design phase, getting to constructability, and now you've got a manufacturing process. And then take me through a little bit, if you could, on the manufacturing process side. And then once these modules are delivered, and you can use the Maryland example if you want, what's the next kind of step for there, and are there regulatory considerations or other things that have to be contemplated before they officially can be kind of put online to be used for their intended purpose?
Yeah. So with your target audience, I think maybe the place to start with is the nature of the deal. And then we'll go into assembly and authorities having jurisdiction. And the big joke with our team for a month now is, hey, Ben, where's the PO? Because it seemed like it was a go and everything's moving forward, and then all of a sudden silence, right? And we have to put ourselves in the chair of people who are trying to decide whether or not they need this, right? Are they going to spend millions of dollars on this particular technology when the projections keep changing all the time? And they've found a way to handle a certain issue, and it seems like it's going well one day, and the next day it feels like the sky's falling and the wheels have fallen off, and they couldn't possibly house people in tents, and all that chaos that's brewing for everybody right now who's at the center of this, from both a governmental agency to a healthcare system to healthcare providers themselves. And so finally one day the PO shows up, and but then it's not a construction contract. It's a purchase order for a product. And so what are the elements of that have to be worked through between the parties to be able to make sure we're all on the same page about how, what it's going to be, how it's going to be sat down, what really even what is it, right? So Kurt and his team are working through final details of construction documents. Have you ever done concept design to CDs in 4 weeks, Kurt?
No.
Because you just did, right? I mean, wow.
Right.
Be careful, guys. Owners are going to hear this and think.
There you go. Well, it's funny because we put our numbers into, backlog, right? Everybody has backlog projections for staffing, and we burn through that backlog so quickly that it's just unusual. Normally a project of this size would take maybe 6-8 months to get out the door and get constructed and built. And so it's just, for us, I think for a constructor and a designer, not a product designer, that burn time is pretty quick. And so we have to be prepared for that, even with our staffing contingency. Luckily, because of where we're at, we had some people who were readily available that we could just put on this and do it as well. So I think, availability of resources, staff, timing, it all kind of came together in a perfect storm to make this happen.
Yeah, the cash flow is so different, right? I mean, when you're doing a manufactured product like this, it's way more upfront cost than a typical construction project and design and construction project would be. And so, we started with a warehouse that had cranes and hoisting equipment and rigging and tires and parts and pieces sitting in it. And, one day we have to make the decision, okay, let's clear it all out, right? We're really serious about this. We're going to begin production. So, over a weekend, everything that's in there goes out. And then all of a sudden, you've got your kind of initial prototype of what your fabrication line is going to look like. And we, as a contractor, we're used to detailed planning around, and we use a process called the Boldt production system. It's an adaptation of Lean Last Planner, and but with more of a focus on production management. And so, I think the fact that we have this system that's set up that's more production management focused than the traditional Last Planner arrangement, because we do a lot of self-perform work, really helped us. But again, it's not the same as a fabrication line setup, and it's definitely not manufacturing. And so, our initial iterations about how we would set up stations and what's tack times at each station were all things that we were working through. And in the meantime, we're trying to pin down, what does this cost? Does it fit our original cost model? Can we beat those numbers, or we have giant risks that we haven't thought of yet? And so, in theory, we have enough experience with prefabrication that we understand that pretty much every time we look at it, it doesn't look like it's going to pencil out. The first cost just looks like it's too much. We should just do this the conventional way. And every time we prefabricate something or we modularize something in the history of our business, it always proves to be beneficial. And so we just said, we are going to do this, and we're going to do it in a major way. and we're going to deal with whatever that looks like along the way. And so we're fortunate that we have some production minds inside of our organization. Klaus Bergidi is the name of one of our lean practitioners. Klaus also runs our self-perform work. He's a regular speaker at conferences and conventions around Boldt production system and construction production flow. But he also spent time, he's from Sweden, and he spent time working for Volvo. And so he saw fabrication and manufacturing in that setting. And to have somebody like that be able to help design our production system from scratch, basically, is invaluable. And then you've got to have builders on the backside of it to be able to say, we're going to receive this, we're going to stage it like this, we're going to get these foundations together. And I think the other piece that is really valuable as we look back at how this came to be is that Kurt's team has the engineering disciplines in-house around mechanical, electrical, and our team had engineering disciplines in-house around structural. And with what we're trying to do, with the fact that this is a product and so much of what we do is about how we do it, the fact that we had that structural engineering side and that Kurt's team was willing to listen to how to do it, right? The input of the constructor and really sort of pulled that out of us. And I'm, that is not standard practice for our industry and our conventional roles. And I'm just grateful to he and his team for that.
Well, Ben, it's a really good point. I was going to say, I think there's an underlying thing we aren't paying enough attention to, and that is Boldt was a big leader in lean construction early on, and probably for, 10, 15 years now has really been leading the industry. We adopted lean shortly thereafter, being in the same market. We'd heard the talks that Boldt was out, talking to people about. We got infected by that idea and have really used it as a way of doing business. So the common platform is really lean construction of this whole effort. To Ben's point, if it was target value design or component-based design about how we broke the building down, our project manager, Kyle Wiseman, was really adept at how to do that.
He was awesome.
Yeah, very just a natural fit. And the same thing with the engineers. If you think about it, we were trying to create normalcy in the healthcare environment. So for our job, it was, how can I create the interior environment that looks and feels like a healthcare setting? Well, we knew that, but the engineers, so people like Jeff Harris or Chris Tobiasen from our office, had to work with the constructors to say, the infrastructure is the thing that's got to change, because we don't have head clearances and we don't have all the things we normally build into a design that would make that easy. So that was really the challenge, was to get the engineered systems to serve the building in a way, with not having traditional, construction techniques. So they had to be really innovative and creative. For instance, we used a traditional 3-ton air handling unit you'd find on top of a convenience store as the mechanical system for the building. But we retrofitted it with HEPA filtering and the like to be able to serve these clinical quality rooms that we were creating. We put the HEPA filtering on the exhaust side so that we could put this thing in a neighborhood and no one would complain that we were, spewing bad air out into the community. So it was those kinds of engineering systems that really, and thinking, that really helped this come together more easily than it might otherwise.
How did you guys tackle the approvals that you needed, either from governmental entities, local, and we'll use the Maryland example? How have you dealt with that so far? And then to get kind of that last mile that you have before the customer can put it online, what still needs to be done both on the ground and on the approval side?
Yeah, so I smile because it's still underway. Those conversations are still being had. With the emergency nature of this, it's helped some things, right? It's relaxed some areas that normally you would have to have an inspector looking in every wall and touching and feeling this thing as you put it together. In our case, our initial conversations with any of the customers that we've talked to, but in particular Maryland, started with, can you help us understand how your authorities having jurisdiction will view this? And they said, we don't really know. Here are the people, and then let's talk about what's going to be required. And as always, that evolves too, right? So some things that we thought were going to be relaxed now all of a sudden aren't necessarily. And we're jumping through hoops at the last minute trying to get a certification as a modular fabricator in the state of Maryland because they have a requirement for certification as a modular fabricator for commercial construction. So it is constantly evolving. I think the key ingredient is to communicate and to try and get issues like that out on the table from the beginning and talk about them, and to be flexible. If that means that we need to have somebody come here, or we need to take them on a video tour of the fabrication facility or whatever, we'll do whatever. And if that means they need to tear parts and pieces of what we've done and completed open when we get it there, so they can spot check things, sure, we'll do whatever. It's a matter of them helping us understand what the perspective is from the, part of lean is whoever the last planner is, whoever that person is, that's the last one that's actually responsible for the work. And in this case, the authority having jurisdiction is actually responsible for their approval. Can we get that person involved as early as possible and figure out how to, get them to a level of comfort with what we're doing, or adapt what we're doing to something that fits what they want?
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think even from a standpoint of design and requirements, there's something called facility FGI guidelines in the healthcare industry. What we had to do in this case was to take a look at what could we keep and what did we have to throw away because it wasn't mission critical in those requirements. And so what we said is it meets the spirit and the intent of the code. It doesn't meet the letter of the code in all cases, at least in the model that we're shipping to Maryland, for instance. And they understand that, so we made them aware of that. Now that we have a little more time to think about it, and part of what I told Ben when we did this early on is we're a research-based design organization. We do a lot of post-occupancy evaluation. The only way we really want to be part of this is if we can continue to make the model better and improve it through research, right? So what we're doing now is we're going back and looking at the functionality of it. We are looking at are those added costs to meet those FGI guidelines and local regulatory life safety type issues to the letter of that code. And we're trying to evaluate again the cost versus the benefit of doing that for our clients. So we would have a totally, the next version that comes out will be fully code compliant, which gives it a longer shelf life, and allows it to be used for many, many other things. But that's important. And that does have, I think without the forgiveness that the states gave us, I think it would have been a much more difficult path to get there.
I'm sure it's certainly on the timing that you guys have done. I mean, you guys are moving at the speed of light on a process where, you're trying to be quick but not hurry, as the John Wooden quote famously said. But here, the time pressure, it sounds like it brought a lot of people and resources together and, forced everyone to have a laser focus on a variety of things that had to get done. And you guys both commented about applying concepts that you had already been implementing, whether it was the Boldt production system or lean planning on both ends. But what are some examples that you can give of things that you just had to adapt to, whether it was because of time pressure or social distancing, that are new that you think might have a life beyond kind of the current COVID environment because they worked well?
Mm-hmm.
Let me think about that for a minute longer. It does raise another point in my head, and maybe Kurt will come back to and get your perspective on Eric's question while I spin down a little different road. This didn't go perfectly, right? We were constantly wringing our hands about what the purchase order was going to, how many units did they want, what price point, because we had options associated with it. And we were being asked hey, what about a bulk purchasing? If we were to buy X number of these from you, that should cost a lot less, right? Well, yeah, but we haven't built the first ones yet, and so our risk is if we give you the volume discount and then you choose to not take it, what happens? And so in the 11th hour, we were moving so fast, we went from cost model to detailed estimate, in the course of a day, right? We'd been operating on the cost model side for about a week and a half to 2 weeks almost, and then in one day we had the opportunity to do that deep dive estimate where we've sent it out, we're getting input from trade partners and others, and now all of a sudden that stuff starts to culminate. And we had as is the case with many construction projects, it's kind of almost part of the process. You get to that point where now all of a sudden the numbers don't work, and you got to go revisit that. And so we had to reboot and do a very quick iteration of value analysis and optimization to the point of, you're on the phone with the customer talking about what it is they want and what they thought they bought it for. And the team is helping them understand, well, actually, if you break it up like that, we thought they wanted a larger module, and then they wanted smaller modules. Well, smaller modules means more head-end equipment. It means more, you've got to have switchgear. You've got to have a manifold to connect all your gases to, and that doesn't change if you're doing 32 beds in a unit or you're doing 8 beds in a unit. So having those kinds of deep conversations and gaining that understanding on their side under fire, and our team having to respond to the cost implication of that, not to mention a bust from estimate to estimate relative to just cost of products and people, created a day and a half worth of just absolute firestorm that we managed through again because of great collaboration. And right. It happens on lots of projects, but it happened on this one. It happened super, it's the hyper intense sort of situation.
Yeah, I would say the word rapid prototyping doesn't even cover it, right? So in some cases it was design build, in some cases it was build design. And so that was the nature of how we collaborated, and we had to be comfortable with that, and that we trusted each other that we would make the right decision. Ben's right. When we looked at that, he came back and said, we really need to reduce the amount of staff space we have. They need to take one 12 by 40 module off this building because we have to balance the budget with the requests that the owners made. Well, okay, we could just throw away all the staff work areas, but we didn't. What we did was we redesigned the nursing station and work area with a staff break area within the same amount of space. So again, that pressure, could have blown the thing apart. It actually made the concept better, right? Because we came back a second or third time and said, can we re-prototype this idea around a more efficient model? And so, we have to also look at it from a designer's perspective, right? We cannot get married to any solution if there's a better idea out there. And that was kind of the idea we had to take throughout this whole process is, it doesn't have to be our idea, it's got to be the best idea. And that could come from a fabricator, that could come from a trade contractor, it could come from Boldt. We didn't care as long as the idea was better than the one we were developing. And so it takes a certain sort of humility to work under that environment. But we kind of gave our team the right mindset. And again, this idea of it's a crisis, we have to respond, we have a time frame, does a lot towards creating that sort of decision making.
I think back to Eric, your original question, from Boldt's perspective, I don't know that we'll ever go into a new project and skip over the step of what about full building modular on this project? Would that be of benefit to the customer or the outcome along the way? And how do we have a partnership like the one, we've had conversations about between HGA and Boldt, we're learning together how to work differently, and probably we'll carry that into other aspects of our business that aren't just the two of us on the project. And what does that look like and feel like for us as we go about the rest of our in the rest of our business. And it's pretty exciting. It's pretty cool to know that at some point, we've developed an even deeper relationship with each other where we know we can accomplish almost anything. And B, we also have gained a set of skills that can be useful to our customers in any setting. And we're going to, be able to preach that story throughout the organization, from here on out. Right, Kurt?
No, I think that's right. I think that's true. And the idea, this idea of prefabrication's been around. It's been developing, but I think this particular, for us at least, this crisis has caused that learning curve to compress. Right. So things that we were maybe not that comfortable with trying or experimenting with in a virtual world, we had to do. Right. Could we prefabricate certain elements versus buying other things? We've deferred to what was familiar, right? So here, this crisis, nothing was familiar, right? If you think about your own lives, right? So as an upsetting influence, it was great. We were in the right frame of mind. Let's try it. Let's see if it works, right? And then guess what? We don't have any time to accept failure. We have to have success here. So that was, I think that will cause us now, and in our case, I think we're going to evaluate the benefit of travel time versus meeting time, right? Boldt's 2 hours away from us, right? Hour and 45. So for a half-hour meeting, we would have driven an hour and 45 minutes both ways. There's only so much time in a day, and what is the most productive way to put that time to good use? And so I think a lot of employers are going to be looking at, like, when we open the doors to return people back to work, okay, is that the most effective way to do what kind of job, right? So, and then what about this creative process? What about the technology that we used? I dare say that we'll pick up a pencil and start drawing in 2 dimensions. We may never do that again, given the experience we had with virtual reality and starting in the real world. And, virtual reality is actually not 3D, it's 4D, because it has the element of time built into it, right? So the fact that you experience real-time motion, movement, etc. And so for us, exploring that to its limit, I think we're going to really leverage that with our clients, in the future. We won't go back to traditional design methodologies.
Guys, even better answers than I thought for with my questions. So thanks for that. As we kind of draw to a close here, can you guys give, any final thoughts, things that you're most proud of with where things are at now and kind of the projection going forward, or, anything to wrap up this, which clearly, you guys have a lot to be proud of. As someone who does a lot in the construction space, hearing you guys talk about this and knowing the challenges that you had to work through and the time crunch and everything else, it's pretty amazing that you've done what you've done. So I want to give you the floor for anything to wrap up what's been a really interesting conversation.
Well, I'll go first. Sure. I'll tell you what, I am not only I'm proud of the people involved in this. I'm proud of the expertise that the team has brought to bear on it. I'm proud of the drive and the work ethic and the positivity of everybody involved in the face of truly uncertain times. I'm proud of I'm certain on Kurt's side there were people inside the practice saying, at one point, really, are we going to get paid for this? Like, are you guys nuts? Because that's certainly what was happening inside our walls as well. And when you take a major risk like this to develop something that's different than your standard course of business, in a lot of ways you're exposing yourself to all the potential consequences of that, especially in a time when cash is crunched and customers are shutting jobs down left and right. And so I think just handling the stress of this, and the dynamic of this team, I'm so thankful for, and appreciative and grateful to have been part of it.
Yeah, I agree with Ben. It is the attitude of the individuals, the can-do aspect of this that came behind. Ben had the initial vision, could we do this? And I give him all the credit in the world of being a great leader from that respect, as he kept bringing people back to the focus. And I think our partnership is something that I really value through all this. Again, Ben and I have never met each other in person.
Yeah, how about that? Isn't that crazy?
You guys might not like each other if you meet in person, but I'm glad you have a good relationship.
I'm probably sure I probably cheered for him a lot when he was on the field. He just didn't know it. But I but I do say that it's been that relationship. We've known Boldt. Our first Wisconsin project back in the late 80s was done with Boldt Construction. So HGA is a national firm, but we've been in Milwaukee since 1987. And so our first project was really with Boldt. Boldt was the constructor. We've known them for a long time. But Ben's brought a nice energy to it. And I think our relationship as sort of the leadership of this team has allowed everybody to know that, hey, we're lockstep. We have a vision. We are going to get this done. And that's maybe what I'm proudest of is that the team rallied behind that vision and really came through for the benefit of our firms, our patients, and frankly, the country in general. So that altruistic spirit still lives within me, that we did something good, and we built a company and a product and everything else that surrounds it. But bottom line is, I think we help people.
Yeah, kudos to both you guys and your organizations for stepping up in this time of need. I really want to thank you guys so much for your time today. It's clear to me that you guys have come up with an innovative product that's the result of a lot of creativity, ingenuity, and risk-taking. And I think there's a lot of good lessons to come from what you talked about today. And I definitely see that the time pressure created a diamond and didn't blow things up. So good analogy that I'm going to go to the well on. So again, thank you. For this interview and more thought leadership, please check out our Husch Blackwell Construction Academy page, and there'll be profiles of both Ben and Kurt going up on there as well. So thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. This has been fun.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.